Hey, you ever been on a road trip through the Northwest? We visited a few of the most beautiful and interesting places to see in Washington, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, and South Dakota in the summer of 2024. I put together this little travel video to share some of those places and a few of our impressions along the way. We left our home in Pasco, Washington, early on a Monday. We were excited to get started on our first day, and we pulled out just after 4 a.m. Heading east for a few miles, we connected to Highway 395 and drove north towards Spokane while it was still dark. Our first day's drive was going to be our longest, over 500 miles, with the idea of getting as close to Yellowstone National Park as possible before stopping for the night. Passing through Spokane, we were only about 20 miles from the Idaho state line and on into the mountains heading to Coeur d'Alene. This is a very beautiful stretch of road which passes through the Bitterroot Range of mountains. It's only about 70 or so miles from Coeur d'Alene to Lookout Pass, which is the Montana state line, and then gassing up in St. Regis at Huck's Grill. Sue could not resist getting a huckleberry shake before getting back on the road. An hour later, we left the Lolo National Forest and descended into Missoula, Montana, home of the University of Montana. Another old Northwest town settled in 1860, Missoula is known today for its dense trees and beautiful architecture. We didn't stay very long, though, with another 200 miles to drive on our first day, so we pressed on to Butte before stopping for lunch. We had no idea of the history of this town and were fascinated to discover what a rich history of copper and silver mining this place has. We stumbled upon the Granite Mountain Memorial Overlook, and were so moved by the things we read about the miners who lived and died there. If you have a chance, we recommend you visit this memorial. From the memorial, we were able to see the Berkeley Pit Mine, where they extracted 1.5 billion tons of material, including over 290 million tons of copper ore. It was known as the richest hill on Earth. After this, and having already traveled 450 miles, we thought it was time to get some lunch before the last few miles. We found a really cool Irish pub called Sean O'Donnell's, where we had an authentic Irish meal. It was so good. Then we got back on the road for the last leg of our first day, where we stopped for the night in Belgrade, Montana. We rented a trailer where we spent the night, ready to see Yellowstone the next day. It was a long day, and we were happy to have a place to rest.
Where's day 2?
Glad you asked. The second day of our road trip was all about Yellowstone National Park. From Belgrade, we headed south straight down Highway 85-191 to West Yellowstone, so we could enter the park from the west. West Yellowstone is a really cool little community with a population of just over 1,000 people and has the look and feel of an old western town. There are shops, restaurants, and a visitor center there. So we decided to stop for a few minutes before entering the park to see what was inside the visitor center. Since this was the first time either of us had been to Yellowstone, we got some info on what to do when we actually got into the park, and then we got in line. After looking at our map, we decided to focus our travel on the southern half of the park. We wanted to see Old Faithful, of course, and Yellowstone Lake, and that seemed the best way to make sure we didn't miss those spots. Once inside, we traveled east a few miles, and then turned south, where our first discovery was Firehole Canyon. This road takes you south to a waterfall and parallels the main road through a canyon with steep walls. The water in the falls was surprisingly strong, even at the end of the summer. After joining the main road again, Highway 191 loosely follows the Firehole River, and as we drove south, we caught sight of our first Yellowstone resident. We were much more interested in old Shaggy than he was in us. After joining the main road again, the Firehole River Canyon eventually leads to an open area where the Grand Prismatic Spring is located. This was a truly awesome sight. This hot spring is the largest in the United States and the third largest in the world. There are signs everywhere telling visitors to stay on the boardwalk and not step out onto the springs. The crusted surface caves in easily, and the water temperature ranges from about 150 to 190 degrees. And it's said that at least 20 people have died from falling or diving into the hot springs in Yellowstone Park, so you want to make sure you don't get too close. The colors of the spring are so vibrant, and the water is crystal clear, with bubbles and steam rising up from the lake. It's definitely something you don't want to miss when you visit. Our next stop was Old Faithful. This is the world's most famous geyser, which erupts up to 20 times each day and has done so for years. Although remarkably consistent, the height and intensity of each eruption depends on how much steam and water was ejected in the last eruption. Fortunately for us, the visitor center in the lodge has a sign estimating the next eruption, so we did a little shopping as we waited for Old Faithful to do its thing. As we watched, and right on cue, Old Faithful erupted. Yellowstone National Park sits atop a supervolcano which heats the groundwater to boiling and causes it to erupt from underground chambers. Old Faithful is a perfect example of one such underground chamber which refills time after time and certainly did not disappoint us when we were there. A first trip to Yellowstone is not complete without seeing this awe-inspiring event. After Old Faithful, we crossed over the Continental Divide at over 8,000 feet in elevation, then continued on to West Thumb, where we had a great view of Yellowstone Lake. The lake is the largest high-elevation lake in North America and is about 20 miles long and 14 miles wide. It was especially interesting to see the bubbling hot water rising out of the earth right at the lakeshore. It was time to press on to the upper and lower falls as we were running a little short of time. There was still so much to see, and having only one day in Yellowstone, we knew we were going to miss a lot, but used this road trip to get just a taste of the park for a return visit in the future. As we followed our map to the upper and lower falls, we came through a grassland and were so excited to see some buffalo near the road. We often use the word buffalo to describe these guys, but they are actually bison, not buffalo. Bison have a large hump on their back and huge heads, whereas buffalo have smaller heads and no hump, such as are native to Africa and Asia. In any case, these awesome creatures are descendants of the last wild bison herd in the American West, and were estimated to number about 5,000 back in 2021. Even though the bulls weigh up to 2,000 pounds, these amazing animals can run up to 35 miles an hour and can actually jump over 6 feet. They typically live up to 25 years. What a pleasure it was to see this herd on our way to the falls. As we traveled to Yellowstone Falls, we had to make a choice about which side of the canyon we were going to view the falls from. We chose the area called the Upper Falls Viewpoint, and another called Artist Point, simply because of the names. These are on the east side of the Yellowstone River Canyon. By the time we got there, it was later in the afternoon, and the afternoon sunlight made the view glow in the late summer sun. Our day in Yellowstone was almost over, and it was time for us to continue east on our journey to Cody, Wyoming. On our way out of the park, we saw some deer on the side of the road. As we slowed and stopped for a few seconds, they were eating grass and seemed to enjoy our company. On the same road, we did happen to see a mama bear and her cub, but they were far from the highway in a heavily wooded area, so we couldn't get a good picture. A telephoto lens would have come in really handy. Coming out of Yellowstone on Highway 14, we descended through the mountains towards Cody. The average elevation of Yellowstone is roughly 8,000 feet, and Cody is about 5,000, so the difference in elevation is around 3,000 feet. The drive through these mountains was spectacular. Just before we got into town, we discovered the Buffalo Bill Cody State Park and Reservoir. Such a beautiful spot before heading through the Cody Mountain Tunnel that leads to the outskirts of the city. As you approach the tunnel, there is a dam located on the eastern side of the reservoir that was originally opened in 1910. At that time, it was the tallest dam in the world. Known at its construction as the Shoshone Dam, it was renamed in 1946 to honor Buffalo Bill Cody, who founded the nearby town. And now, as we finally ended the second day of our road trip, we entered Cody, Wyoming through the Cody Mountain Tunnel with all the bugs we collected in Yellowstone on our windshield. Haha. This tunnel is about 1.5 miles long and was an amazing feat of engineering for its day. Cody has a rich Old West history and is known for its astonishing western beauty. Buffalo Bill was visiting Sheridan, Wyoming in 1894, and his son-in-law took him to the top of the Bighorn Mountains for a view over the Bighorn Basin. Cody had heard of this area from Indians, and after seeing it for himself, joined a group of businessmen in founding the town. He saw how beautiful it was, with lots of fish and game, and since it was close to Yellowstone, it was sure to attract tourists. When the railroad was constructed, and with federal money pouring in to build the dam, the town of Cody began to grow. One fun fact is that it is the resting place of John Liver-Eating Johnson, or Jeremiah Johnson as portrayed in the 1972 movie starring Robert Redford. This Old West trapper and mountain man was originally buried in Los Angeles, but his remains were moved to Cody to be closer to his mountain home. What a full day we had on our second day. As we entered the town and stopped for the night, we looked forward to our next day's trip into South Dakota to see Mount Rushmore.
Wake up! It's time to get on the road again!
Yes. Okay, we're up and on the road. On our third day, we had a lot of ground to cover. Today's plan was to drive all the way through Wyoming, through the southern part of the Bighorn National Forest, then into the Black Hills of South Dakota to Mount Rushmore. This was going to be about 400 miles through some of the most open areas in north central Wyoming you could imagine. If you enjoy wide open spaces, this is the drive for you.
What you doing out here all by yourself?
We drove east on Highway 14 to the little town of Graybull, then south on Highway 20, where it connects to Highway 16 at Worland. From here, we turned east, again heading towards the Bighorn National Forest. Driving through miles and miles of this open range and ranch land in Wyoming is hard to describe. It felt so open, so vast. The sky was big and blue with nothing blocking our view. There was hardly any traffic. Even though we were hours on the road, the natural beauty of the place gave us a really relaxed feeling. Just before we entered the Bighorn National Forest, we came across a little town called Teton Sleep. Seeing this town coming up on the map, we wondered how the town got its unusual name. Apparently, Teton Sleep was an American Indian rest stop between Fort Laramie in the southeast of Wyoming and Yellowstone in the west. Being about 10 days' travel from Fort Laramie to Yellowstone, the Indians gave it the name Ten Sleeps because it was 10 nights' travel from east to the west. After gassing up, we headed off into the Bighorn National Forest and on to Buffalo, Wyoming. This is just about as Old West as it gets. The 60-mile drive between Teton Sleep and Buffalo, Wyoming took us through the southern tip of the Bighorn National Forest. These were some of the most interesting rock formations on our drive that day. This route also took us past Meadowlark Lake, abundant with rainbow trout, brook trout, and cutthroat. Climbing up to the Powder River Pass at almost 10,000 feet, we had a little over 30 miles left before getting into Buffalo. Then, as we entered Buffalo, we found it to be a fun and interesting town. Buffalo's main street has more than a dozen historic buildings, including the Occidental Hotel. This hotel is where Owen Wister spent time in the 1880s, observing cowboys, cattlemen, lawmen, and desperados for the creation of his classic 1902 novel, The Virginian. Other notable personalities who visited Buffalo and stayed at the Occidental Hotel are Buffalo Bill Cody, of course, Calamity Jane, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, Tom Horn, Teddy Roosevelt, and Ernest Hemingway. What a town! From Buffalo, we were able to connect to the I-90 again and continue east on our last leg to Mount Rushmore. With 3 more hours to drive, we had already seen so much. The route we had just taken through north central Wyoming was awesome, but now we were able to go a little faster on the interstate.
Were you speeding?
Were we speeding? Us? Oh, no way, it didn't happen, man. So, continuing east, we approached the Thunder Basin National Grasslands, the South Dakota state line, and on into the Black Hills. Passing through Custer, South Dakota, we had only 20 miles left until we reached Mount Rushmore. The terrain became much more rocky, with granite spires jutting out of the hills. This was a drastic change from the grasslands we had just passed through. With every mile we drove, our anticipation grew. We had seen hundreds of pictures of Mount Rushmore over our lifetimes, but seeing this national monument in person is something entirely different. Finally, after 7 hours of driving that day, we arrived. The strong feelings we experienced when we stood in the viewing area of the monument took us a little by surprise. We didn't really expect it. But as we looked up into the faces of those men carved in stone, thoughts flooded into our minds of the history of our nation and all the great sacrifices made, not only by these men, but all the men and women of our nation over the last 250 years. I must say it made us a little emotional. We are so thankful to live in America. God has certainly shed His grace on this nation and her people. This was one of the true highlights of our trip. We spent the night in Rapid City, South Dakota, about 20 miles northeast of the monument.
Would you please wake up? We really must be on our way.
Yep, time to go. As the sun rose on our fourth day, we headed out east again on Interstate 90. Our destination for today was the Badlands National Park in South Dakota. Our exit to Badlands was about 75 miles east of Rapid City, and this was the furthest east we traveled on our road trip. Our journey had taken us over 1,000 miles from our home in Pasco, and we were now squarely in the middle of the Great Plains, only about 130 miles away from the Missouri River. This stretch of road was straight and flat, no hills, trees, or buildings for that matter. The sun was up, and it looked like it was going to be a bright and beautiful day. When we originally planned our trip, we noticed on the map there was a historic site just to the north of our exit to the Badlands that caught our attention. The Minuteman National Historic Site and Visitor Center commemorate an interesting bit of history from our nation's past. During the Cold War, there were 150 nuclear missile launch sites built across the U.S. as a deterrent to a first strike by the old Soviet Union. This particular site was completed in 1963, right at the height of the Cold War. Those of us in the boomer generation remember the drills we did in elementary school in the 60s. All school-age children had learned to duck under our desks and cover our heads at the sight of a bright flash. This historic site was quite a reminder of the Cold War years that peaked during our early childhood. And then, it was time to head south into the Badlands. Having not had the opportunity earlier in life to do much traveling, I had never heard of the Badlands of South Dakota until watching the film Jurassic Park in 1993. In the opening scene of that movie, paleontologists Dr. Grant, played by Sam Neill, and Ellie Sattler, played by Laura Dern, were commissioned to lead a team to do a dig for fossils there. The name Badlands sounded so remote and interesting, and since viewing that movie all those years ago, I had always wanted to visit there. Well, this was the day I had my chance to see what the Badlands was all about. It turned out to be a very hot and dry day with a strong breeze. Not a drop of moisture to be felt anywhere. We paused for a few moments at the park sign to take a look around the entrance. Even in this desolate wasteland, it had a peculiar sort of beauty. We drove past the Badlands Ranch store, eager to get further into the park. Then we came across the Prairie Homestead, which is on the National Register of Historic Places. This site has a sod house that was built in 1909 and one of the last remaining sod home structures in the state. Some of the back walls were made of sod bricks, and it was literally built right into the ground. And, while we're on the subject of prairie dwellings, what prairie home would be complete without a dog?
What? Do you mean a big vicious animal?
No, I mean a prairie dog, of course. These dogs were pretty tame. I think they were being fed by visitors. Now back in the truck to complete the Badlands loop, we checked out other areas of the park. Badlands National Park has an open hiking policy, which means visitors can go off-trail and explore wherever they like. One word of caution though, there are lots of places where you can fall hundreds of feet into deep chasms, so if you do go, be cautious. Probably the best way to describe the Badlands is otherworldly. The Pierre Shale and other sedimentary rock formations are arranged in colorful layers, and there are a wide variety of fish and marine fossils indicating floodwaters once swept over this area of the continent as recorded in the biblical flood narrative of Genesis chapter 7. This 380 square mile preserve was established as a national monument in 1939 and a national park in 1978. Over 1 million people visit the Badlands each year, and it is ranked as the 24th most visited national park in the U.S. This places the park in the top half in terms of popularity. Even though many other national parks have more visitors each year, we believe whatever the Badlands lacks in popularity is more than made up for in its uniqueness and rugged beauty. There are certainly lots and lots of rock formations here, but the greatest percentage of the Badlands is actually prairie grassland. It was wonderful to have the feel of the warm summer breeze on our faces. As the afternoon passed by, our thoughts returned to the road again. Once we left the park and headed north to the I-90, we realized that our trek would no longer be in an easterly direction. We had gone as far east as we planned to on our road trip, and now our direction was going to be predominantly west. Having worked up an appetite from our hiking around the Badlands, we stopped for lunch later in the afternoon. We exited the park at Wall, South Dakota. This small town really got our curiosity going because for miles and miles as we approached the Badlands going east, we saw these highway signs advertising a business called Wall Drug. We started seeing these signs on the other side of the Black Hills, so thought it a little strange for a business to advertise from such a long distance away. Little did we realize Wall Drug was a huge multi-store operation that spreads out all over downtown.
Wait, go back! What was that monstrous thing?
That's a jackalope. Ha ha ha. They have those in Wyoming. Don't worry, they're not real. Anyway, Wall Drug was a humble little pharmacy started by a pharmacist named Ted Husted in 1931. His wife suggested they offer ice water to weary travelers heading west to Yellowstone to drum up more business. This drew in quite a number of visitors from the highway, and from that point on, Wall Drug grew into what it is today. The combination of stores and attractions is truly eclectic. Even though this was our first visit to Wall Drug, it obviously has become a very famous place to visit as we saw several tour buses parked along the streets. I guess you could say there were busloads of people there, literally. Right on the main street was the Badlands Saloon and Grill, where we had our lunch. Sue had a cheeseburger, and I tried out a buffalo burger. I think I should have had a cheeseburger instead. Oh well, lessons learned. After finishing our lunch, we got back on the road and headed west, back to Rapid City, then south down to Buffalo Gap. We planned to spend the night in Casper, Wyoming, so we still had 300 miles to travel on long, lonely stretches of road before our day was going to be over. There's just something so satisfying about being on a lonely country highway on a sunny afternoon in late summer. These parts of South Dakota and Wyoming still have a very remote feeling. Seeing the wind blowing through the prairie made us think of what it must have been like to travel through here on horses or in carts 150 years ago. The sun was setting low on the horizon as we came into Casper. Our fourth day was nearly over, and we were graced by the famously sublime Wyoming late summer sunset as we headed into town.
what are these incredible mountains?
These, my friend, are the mountains of the Grand Teton National Park. This was our destination on our 5th day of travel. But before we were able to take in these beautiful sights, we had to get there from Casper. We continued the next morning in a westerly direction along Highway 26, right through the center of Wyoming. 2 hours and 120 miles later, we entered the Wind River Reservation and the city of Riverton. From Riverton, we traveled northwest, climbing in elevation along Highway 26 from about 5,000 feet to almost 7,000 feet, which is the elevation at Dubois, Wyoming. As we climbed up the mountain, there were no shortage of beautiful landscapes around each curve. Then, about 70 miles past Riverton, and still on Highway 26, we came across an interesting attraction called the National Museum of Military Vehicles. This museum is a 160,000 square foot facility with over 500 military vehicles and firearms collection on display, ranging from the Spanish-American War up to the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. If you are a military history buff or interested in military vehicles, you'll want to spend an afternoon checking this out. The nearby town of Dubois, Wyoming, just up the road, is the town where Butch Cassidy owned and managed a ranch in 1890. And, although having a small population nowadays, this community was once the site of the largest supplier of railroad ties in the nation, which, in the early days, were all cut by hand. We continued to climb along Highway 26 for the next 30 miles to the Continental Divide at an elevation of over 9,800 feet. After cresting the divide, we began to descend to a point where the Grand Teton National Park could be seen in the distance. We stopped at a viewpoint to take in the mountains from far away. The mountain fields were alive with color, and the backdrop of the Tetons, although far away, were absolutely stunning. Even from miles away, these majestic mountains looked like tall cathedrals standing in the distance, reaching into the heavens. On that day, the sky was a striking light blue with beautiful white clouds as far as the eye could see. The closer we drove, the taller and more impressive the Tetons appeared. The Grand Teton National Park is approximately 310,000 acres and includes major peaks along a 40-mile stretch of mountains and was established in 1929. The park is named for its tallest peak, Grand Teton, which rises more than 7,000 feet above Jackson Hole. We drove past Jackson Lake, one of the largest high-altitude lakes in the United States. This lake is about 15 miles long and 7 miles wide. These beautiful mountains were unknown to all but Native Americans until 1807. Then, a man named John Coulter, who was a member of the Lewis and Clark Corps of Discovery, asked for permission to lead the expedition on the journey back from the Pacific Ocean. He wanted to join 2 others heading west to become fur trappers and passed through Jackson Hole in the winter of 1807-1808 and beheld the Teton Range. He spent the next 30 years in the region trapping and trading furs and is widely considered America's first true mountain man. As the day continued, we were fortunate to see a break in the clouds and the powder blue sky beyond. What a blessing. Standing at the base of these mountains really made us feel small. The way the peaks jut out of the ground so steeply and abruptly gives them such an imposing presence. The tops are very sharp, and they really did remind us of some sort of Gothic cathedral dedicated to the glory of God. I can only say the pleasure of visiting this monumental range of mountains was, in a way, very humbling. Pictures just do not do the experience justice.
Horses! I see horses! Wait a minute! Wait just a minute! Are those mules? Oh, never mind!
We passed through Jackson Hole and headed west and north on Highway 26, where we spent the night, waking up to our 6th day in a comfortable little cabin in Swan Valley, Idaho. Our destination for the morning was the town of Idaho Falls, which was just about an hour away. The plan was to head north on Highway 28 along the eastern edge of Idaho through Salmon, and then stay our last night in Lolo, Montana. We could have taken the southern route connecting to Twin Falls and then on through Boise, but wanted the opportunity to see Salmon, where Sue's father spent time as a boy, and to see if we could find the cemetery where her grandfather was laid to rest. We pulled into Idaho Falls, and what we saw left us with a favorable impression. It seemed to be a clean town with a nice little downtown. With a population of 68,000, Idaho Falls is the 4th most populous city in Idaho. The Snake River runs through the middle of the town, and the falls for which the city is named is not a natural feature, but was constructed in 1909 as part of a hydroelectric project to supply the city with electricity. The city has a beautiful park, Heritage Park, right along the river. We enjoyed a stroll there as we took in the sights of the city and the falls. This is also the site where Idaho's first toll bridge across the Snake River was built in 1865. Until then, the only way to cross was a ferry about 9 miles upstream. After stretching our legs for a while, we found a little Mexican restaurant nearby and had some lunch. Then, it was time to get back on the road heading north towards Salmon. Once we got out of the agricultural area around Tarrenton, it was pretty much all desert and ranch land as we traveled up the Lemhi Valley. This valley is situated between the Lost River Range to the west and the Beaverhead Mountains to the east, which is the border between Idaho and Montana. The discovery of gold in 1862 led to a gold rush in the Lemhi area, and in 1910 the Gilmore and Pittsburgh Railroad was constructed, which increased access to the valley and the small towns here. Earlier than that, in 1805, the Lewis and Clark expedition traveled this route to get to the Bitterroot Range further north, where they planned to cross over to the Columbia River. Sue had told me before our trip that she believed her grandfather Adams was buried somewhere in Salmon. We really wanted to see where he was laid to rest, as it was not very likely we would pass this way again anytime soon. So, it was extremely kind that her aunt, who lives there, quickly answered a text message we sent her when we were about an hour out of town. She dropped everything in the middle of her day and met us out at the city cemetery to show us his gravesite. With the surrounding hills, trees, and snow-capped mountains, I can't think of a more beautiful spot to be laid to rest. After spending a little time at the cemetery and saying our goodbyes to Sue's aunt, we continued north on Highway 93. This route took us back into Montana on the eastern side of the Bitterroot Range of mountains. Our stop for the night was Lolo, Montana, only about 10 miles south of Missoula. We decided to spend our last night in an Airbnb near Lolo, as we planned to take Highway 12 into Lewiston. This traces the route taken by Lewis and Clark in the Corps of Discovery through the Bitterroot Range. So, after 6 full days of driving and sightseeing, we pulled into our rental to rest up for our final day. On the last day of our trip, we started our day with a short drive to the Lolo Pass Visitor Center, just a few miles south of where we stayed the night, and right at the Montana-Idaho state line. In this visitor center, there's a lot of interesting information about the Lewis and Clark expedition, also known as the Corps of Discovery. As you may recall from your high school history lessons, this expedition was sanctioned by Thomas Jefferson after the Louisiana Purchase in 1803, which essentially doubled the size of the then United States. The Corps passed through this area in the fall of 1805 on their journey to find the famed Northwest Passage to the Pacific Ocean. Over the course of 11 days, as they attempted to pass through these mountains, they encountered incredible hardship, including almost impossibly rugged terrain, snow and ice, frostbite, malnutrition, and dehydration. As we know today, they did make it through, although it was the most difficult part of their entire journey. We took Highway 12 the 200 miles down the mountain into Lewiston, Idaho, which roughly follows their route. Driving this highway with all of its twists and turns took us about 5 hours to get to Lewiston, so I couldn't say it was a quick and easy drive. However, there were definitely some beautiful sights along the way. Highway 12 follows the west fork of the Lolo Creek until it meets the Idaho state line, then briefly follows Crooked Fork Creek until it dumps into the Loxa River. A few miles after this, the drainage along Highway 12 becomes the Clearwater River, which grows bigger and stronger until it finally empties into the Snake River in Lewiston. As we traveled down Highway 12 through the Nez Perce Clearwater National Forest, the highway took us through the Nez Perce Indian Reservation, and then, after this long morning drive, we finally arrived at Lewiston. Passing over the bridge brought us to Clarkston and back into the state of Washington. After 6.5 days of driving and over 2,500 miles, it was a good feeling to be back in our home state, only about 120 miles from home. On the last leg of our journey, we had a decision to make. From Clarkston, we could have continued on Highway 12 through eastern Washington, which would have taken us through Dayton, Waitsburg, Walla Walla, then home. But instead, we opted to take Highway 261 west at the little town of Delaney, which is a little over 50 miles west of Clarkston. Washington State is known as the Evergreen State, but traveling on the eastern side of the Cascade Range, miles and miles of sage and wheat fields abound. You would never know just a couple of 100 miles to the west lay millions of acres of massive forests with towering evergreen trees. After turning west on 261, the highway swings north again to meet the Snake River at the Lyon's Ferry Bridge. This bridge was originally constructed in 1927 to span the Columbia River at Vantage, Washington, but was removed and stored when the Wanapum Dam was built in the early 60s. Then, in 1968, the bridge was reconstructed at its present location at the confluence of the Snake and Palouse rivers. Driving across the Snake River, we were able to get a good view of the Joso High Rail Bridge. This bridge, which started construction in 1910 and completed in 1914, was considered the highest and longest rail bridge in the world. Currently, it remains an active bridge. It is still the highest and longest rail bridge on the Union Pacific Railway. Passing Lyon's Ferry State Park, we continued just a couple of miles up the highway to Palouse Falls. We drove along the gravel entry road into the Palouse Falls State Park. This unique waterfall is a favorite among visitors to eastern Washington. The rugged basalt rock layers in the canyon and the nearly 200-foot drop make this waterfall a popular destination. As the water from the falls leaves the canyon, it empties into the Snake River about 4 to 5 miles downstream. Getting back on the road, we were now only about an hour from home. Our journey was nearly over, but we still had one last roadside attraction in the little town of Palouse, Washington. This town experienced a boom in the early 20th century during the construction of the railroad which served the local farming community. Eastern Washington has scores of tiny farming towns such as this, among massive tracts of open land. If you enjoy looking at open spaces, you'll love driving through the back roads of Eastern Washington. Back on the road for our last 50 miles. They went by quickly. We thought about all the beautiful and interesting places we had seen over the last 7 days. It had been a pretty aggressive journey, with many miles between the incredible spots we always wanted to visit, but never had an opportunity to see. As we left Clotis and traveled along the Snake River, it was not long before we could see the familiar hills surrounding Tri-Cities, Washington. And even though we enjoyed the trip and all the great and historic places we visited, I must say we were glad to finally be home again. Thank you for joining us on our tour of some great places in the Pacific Northwest. Hopefully, we can do it again sometime soon.